Welcome to the We Are PPS podcast, where we sit down with the staff, students, and community partners working to make Pittsburgh Public Schools one of America's premier school districts, student-focused, well-managed, and innovative. I'm your host, Ebony Pugh, and today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Assistant Superintendent of the Program for Students with Exceptionalities, Patti Camper. Hi, Patti.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to have you here. Prior to taking on the role of the Assistant Superintendent of Program for Students with Exceptionalities, also known as PSE, you served as principal at Pittsburgh Arsenal 68 for 11 years, and before that, as a teacher in the district. How has this experience prepared you to take on such a big task as in your current role?
Well, my teaching experience was all special education. I was an emotional support teacher for 18 years, and as a principal, about a third of our school was also students with disabilities, and we had various programs over the years. And so really Arsenal was a microcosm of the district, and so it really helped me to understand the needs of students with disabilities, the push to help them be included within buildings and their non-disabled peers. And so it still was a huge learning curve. I don't want to say that I walked right in day one and was, on par. It was definitely a big jump and a learning curve for me, but I had a really solid staff that could help me grow in this role and learn what I needed to learn.
That's excellent. You were the first assistant superintendent of PSE. How has this role changed, and what were some of your immediate priorities you set for yourself in this new position?
I would say the biggest change is really just I now sit on superintendent's cabinet, right? So in the past, the executive director for special ed was at least two people removed from the superintendent. And so now being an assistant superintendent, I have more access to Dr. Walters. The problems that are facing special education can be brought to the superintendent's cabinet so that everyone can work together to help solve those problems. And it's not filtering through two or three people and put on a back burner. It really is a priority now in our district to address the concerns in special education. And so, some of my priorities were really, there had been turnover in leadership in PSE, and so the systems and staffing were not taken care of. And as a result, those systems had fallen apart, and schools were no longer getting the support and services that they needed. So my immediate priority was to completely staff the department so that we could meet the needs of schools and rebuild those systems of support.
Recently, the district's Future Ready Special Education Plan received approval from Pennsylvania Bureau of Special Education. The state-required plan incorporates changes in programming that move the Pittsburgh Public Schools out of corrective action. Can you explain what corrective action is and what steps the district has taken to move away from it?
So one of the things that happens from the Bureau of Special Education is that they don't call it auditing, but it really feels like an audit. It's called cyclical monitoring. And basically they pull special education documents, they talk with teachers and students and families to see if we're meeting the requirements of Chapter 14 and IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act. So in short, to see, are we really fulfilling the requirements and doing what we're supposed to be doing? Coming out of COVID and the pandemic, we had our first audit at that point. And, the reality was, coming back from COVID, a lot of the things were not in place. And so we had numerous issues that we had to address as a district. We also had turnover in leadership. And so, we had 20 plus corrective action items. Some of them were pretty easy to fix, like locating policies and posting things on our website, cleaning up our website, filling positions. But other things are very much long-term, really how we approach our IEPs, how we involve parents, how we write IEPs and monitor data toward progress for students to learn and grow over the course of a year. So we have many things that we're still working on this school year. We also have new issues that came to light because of COVID, like e-signatures and virtual meetings. we weren't really prepared for how to run those and how to document them. So it's always been trying to catch up to where we are. And the good news is we are now out of corrective action, and we're just building those procedures and processes so that moving forward, we will be in cyclical monitoring again next school year and hoping for a very different outcome than in 2021.
Wow, so you get a new role and you're getting audited as soon as you go in the door.
Pretty much that's the case.
Well, great work on moving out of corrective action. So I guess in terms you learned a lot too during that process, I'm sure.
I did, really did.
The plan also includes strategies to increase the number of students educated within the least restrictive environment. Why is this an important goal?
So this is actually one of the things that's very important to me as a special ed teacher and a principal who really believes strongly that we should include students in the everyday culture of our schools. Least restrictive environment, first of all, is the law, right? So it is the requirement that we educate students as close to their general ed peers as absolutely possible. In some cases, that's not possible. In some cases, students need specialized programming, and so we should provide that. But our goal should always be for students to be in their least restrictive environment, which means that they're with their non-disabled peers. Part of why that's been really important for me is, education is preparing students for life. We're preparing you to be a productive member of society, however that might be, whether you go on to college, career, or you just go on to get a job and work in the community. Once you leave school, we're all together, right? It's not separate for students with disabilities, separate for people who don't have disabilities. We all coexist in our communities together, and so we have to learn how to work and live together in school so that we can be productive members of society when we're no longer in school.
Yeah, it was a tough year for the Pittsburgh Oliver Citywide Academy school community. This year, students at the school began the year at 4 new satellite sites across PPS. Can you explain how this new approach to educating Oliver students not only helps the district get closer to its goals for special education students, but supports the healing of that school community?
So that was definitely one of the most challenging aspects of my new role. I really kind of walked into a crisis at OCA that just continued to grow. 18 years I was an emotional support teacher, and so Oliver Citywide Academy is an emotional support program. It's a full-time emotional support program. So these are students and staff that are nearest and dearest to my heart. We always had a plan that we were not going to continue to isolate students who needed emotional support services in a building where they were 100% surrounded by all special education students. That model is antiquated, and it really does not allow for students to even have access to programs and students without disabilities if they are able to access that. So, our goal always was to move the programming back into general education buildings all over our district where if and when the time was right, students would be able to participate in lunch, in electives, or even in after-school activities so that they were not completely removed and isolated away from other students in the district. And so I think I'll be the first to say it's not easy to go from being in a building where you are secluded and you don't have the regular day in and day out activities of a school. Schools are very busy places. There's bells ringing, there's announcements, there's noise in the hallway, even if it's just people walking and laughing. And when you've been removed from that for a period of time, coming back it can be overwhelming. And so, I think that there's good and bad. Some of it is that we have students who've been at Oliver Citywide for several years and they've become very comfortable and accustomed to a quiet, supportive, secluded environment. And that does not exist anymore. in terms of being at a completely separate school. But they are adjusting and enjoying access. So getting to play after school sports for the first time without having to get on a PAT bus and go across town and join in with students that they don't see during the school day. They now can literally walk up the stairs and go out like every other student in the building. They also have access to go to the cafeteria, and then the potential, right? So if they choose to remain in the classrooms that are OCA classrooms, then, and if that best meets their needs, they can do that. But if it doesn't, they now have access to programming that they didn't have access to before. So my hope is that as time goes on, the biggest challenge for us as a district is, OCA students are Pittsburgh Public School students, and moving them into buildings with other non-disabled peers. The hope is over time that we embrace them as our students, Pittsburgh Public School students who deserve the same opportunities and education as every other student in the district.
Yeah, wow, that's wonderful. I know this is such a huge topic, and I know there's so many things our listeners probably want me to ask, but we'll surely have you back some other time. But is there anything you want to add before we close out today?
No, just that I'm excited for year two. Year one was overwhelming and certainly a learning year for me. And now I feel like in year two that we're making progress. We're working closer with schools and parents. And now my ultimate goal is to start being in buildings and talking to students so that we can really continue to grow our department so that, this isn't the finished product. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, we can't wait to see what more happens next. Well, that concludes today's episode of We Are PPS. If you're looking for more news and information about the school district, be sure to download our app, Pittsburgh Schools. Thanks for listening, and join us the next time when we talk about efforts underway to improve student attendance. Thank you.